Ready to make a start. I'll ask Charlotte to start the live stream and I'll let you know when we're up and running.
Super, thanks, Matt.
Lovely. Thank you, Leader. The meeting has now started. Thank you.
Thank you. Well, good afternoon all and welcome to the Vale of Glamorgan Council's Cabinet meeting of today, the 10th of October 2024. I'm Councillor Liz Burnett and I chair the meeting as the leader of the Vale of Glamorgan Council and Cabinet member for Performance and Resources. We're using the Council's hybrid platform, and so the usual reminders for us is that the meeting's being live streamed and recorded and will be uploaded to the Vale of Glamorgan Council's website as soon as practicable after the meeting. Any participants in the chamber should ensure their microphone's not activated, and remote attendees should mute themselves when not speaking to avoid any background interference or feedback. To speak, if you're online, either use the request to speak or raise hand function, and the chat function's used only to highlight any technical issues or to attract the attention of the Democratic Service Officer. So we have a fairly full meeting today, so I'll go into the agenda proper straight away. And so agenda item 1 is apologies for absence, and I have 2 apologies today, and that's from Councillor Bronwyn Brooks and Councillor Sandra Perks, and I can see that everybody else is present today. So agenda item 2 is the minutes of the meeting held on the 19th of September 2024. Can I take those as a true reflection or true record of the meeting? I'll move.
And I second.
Thank you, Mark. Good. And then agenda item 3 is to receive declarations of interest, and if there are, the nature of such interests. I'm not aware of having received any declarations. And
no, Leader, none received formally for this meeting. Thank you.
Super, thank you. And nobody's indicating, so no one's forgotten in advance. That's great. Moving on to the references, we actually have 5 references before us today. A reference or agenda item 4 is actually linked to the annual delivery plan monitoring report that we will be discussing at agenda item 11 later on, and items 5, 6, 7 and 8 are all linked to the draft Vale of Glamorgan Council annual self-assessment, which will be discussed under agenda item 12. So therefore, with Cabinet's agreement, I would move that we consider those items under the relevant items on the agenda, that is items 11 and 12. I move. Is anyone available to second?
Happy to second, Chair.
Thank you. And nobody indicating dissent. That's great. So moving on then to agenda item 9. This is the draft Vale of Glamorgan Council corporate plan for 2025 to 2030. So in effect, this is our plan or proposed plan for the next 5 years. And I think it's fair to say that alongside our annual budget, the Council's corporate plan is one of the most important documents that we develop. It lays out what we want to achieve for the Vale and for its people over the next 5 years, and just as importantly, how we plan to do it. This draft corporate plan, I think, is unashamedly ambitious, but it's also realistic, and it seeks to deliver the Council's vision of strong communities with a bright future. To achieve this vision, the Council has set out 5 objectives, or 5 draft objectives. They're not finalised as yet. And those are creating great places to live, work and visit, respecting and celebrating the environment, giving everyone a good start in life, supporting and protecting those who need us, which follows on from our current objective of caring for our most vulnerable, and also being the best council we can be. And I think that that's important to state that up front. Feedback from residents has been hugely important as we've developed these draft objectives and the overall plan. And we've considered our performance and where we know improvements are needed, as well as considering how the council needs to change over coming years. This includes the results of the Let's Talk resident survey and findings from the annual self-assessment. It was really good that over 4,000 residents responded to Let's Talk survey, and it would be really brilliant if as many, if not more, gave us their views now on the direction of the council from 2025 to 2030 and beyond. You know, if you actually think of yourself now and think, what actually would you like? How would you like things to be in 2030? Then that's the type of discussion that we had. What does success look like for the people of the Vale? Tackling the causes and issues arising from poverty is also a key focus that cuts through this draft plan, and a specific section is included to bring together work to address poverty and deprivation. The draft plan also includes a statement on how the council will seek to work in partnership to meet the short and longer term needs of the Vale of Glamorgan. We already work in partnership with a lot of organisations, and I think we need to develop that and do even more. There will be a consultation on the plan, and that's going to run from the 14th of October until the 8th of December. And there will be many, very many opportunities to discuss the plan and to learn about the council's budget and how it's spent. And also, and we'll go into this for the next report, how we're looking to transform as an organisation to ensure that we can meet those promises and that we can deliver the plan. So as well as an online survey so that it's easily accessible, there will be 4 public drop-in sessions across the Vale, and I know that the Cabinet will hopefully be present at as many of those as possible. There'll also be 4 stakeholder and partner focus sessions, so talking to the organisations that we currently work with or who we might work with in the future. And then a final version will be published. It will be brought back to Cabinet, and it will be published in the spring after being formally discussed in full council. So it will go to all the scrutiny committees, and you'll be able to watch discussions online and participate, etc. So it is at the moment, the draft plan is, let's have a look, 46 pages long, which is not as long as previous ones have been, very accessible and actually, hopefully, very easy to go through. It looks at some of the things that we've achieved in the past 5 years, but I said it also looks very much at what we would like to achieve going forward. So there are a number of recommendations before us today. As we, I suppose, set this off on its journey so that hopefully we can have as many conversations about it as we possibly can. And those recommendations are on page 3 of the report. And there are 6, so I'll go through them all. It's quite important. The Cabinet notes the approach taken to draft the corporate plan, so how that's come into being. The Cabinet approves the draft corporate plan Appendix A, which is the one I've just waved around, as the basis for consultation as described in this report. The Cabinet approves the consultation approach and timetable as set out in this report. The Cabinet notes the intention to consider what changes are needed to the performance management framework to facilitate effective monitoring and scrutiny of progress, and receives a further report in due course. And I think it's important that as many people as possible know how we will monitor our progress as we go through the report. 5th recommendation is that Cabinet refers this report to all scrutiny committees to Community Liaison Committee, which I think is this evening actually, and Voluntary Sector Joint Liaison Committee as part of the programme of consultation, requesting any comments to be shared with the Director of Corporate Resources to inform revisions to the corporate plan prior to Cabinet considering a final draft in due course. And finally, and again, this is one of those processes to set the report off on its journey, is that the use of the urgent decision procedure is set out in section 1514 of the Council's Constitution be agreed to enable the consultation process on the draft corporate plan 2025 to 2030 to commence from the 14th of October 2024. I'm really, really looking forward to having those conversations. So I'm very, very pleased to move the recommendations.
And I'm happy to second, Chair.
Thank you, Mark. That's great. And I don't have anyone indicating to speak. So I will take that as agreed and we will move that forward. Thank you. So therefore, going on to agenda item 10, and this is a reshaping programme update. And it's worth having a look at the appendix that is linked. This is Appendix A to this report. And it's, as I said, it's all available, quite easily accessible, and that will also be going to a scrutiny committee. And it provides an update on the reshaping programme that was that was recently agreed in January 2024. Reshaping services itself was something that actually was developed back in 2015, and it was when we were first facing the first huge impacts of austerity, and so we looked at what needed to be done. Many things happened as a result of the last reshaping programme, which these days are actually pretty well accepted. So we're hoping that we can do the same again alongside the corporate plan. So we're going to refocus on it, and with that, we'll be looking at transformational change, how services actually are delivered in the future. We talk about a target operating model, and it's how the council's going to look, how is it going to function, what processes and policies are we going to have, how do we make our services resilient, and how do we embrace digital innovation. And so that's all in the report as well. We talk about reshaping with our community. And that's actually talking to our communities and saying, well, are there better ways of delivering services? And the one that I raise quite often is the way in which some communities have actually taken over their local library and are actually delivering it far better, far more effectively than was previous, when they were purely a library service. And now they are actually lively community hubs, which also have a library service within them. They're still supported, but it's very much run by them. Reshaping our work. Look at how we challenge ourselves to deliver services better and devise services that are fit for the future. And reshaping our resources. So we need to look at how we use not only our people, but our assets and our financial resources. And as I said, and if you look at the types of things that have happened over the year, there's been lots of praise for the Llantwit Major More Than Food project, which is a really super community project down there. The way in which the council took over the operation of Penarth Pier Pavilion when it failed during the pandemic. It's not something that you would have chosen to do, but actually it's a vibrant community building now. And throughout the cost of living crisis, the delivery of the warm welcome through very many community buildings across the Vale. If you have a look at page 5, there's a reshaping prospectus, and that actually covers a lot of the things that we're hoping to do in the future. And as I just mentioned, this talks about rethinking how we measure performance and how it can be monitored and reported. Well, I also want to know how the public will know what those measures are and how we're developing. I think it's fair to say that the Vale Council is at a juncture. We've had a decade, over a decade actually, of austerity, the pandemic, and a cost of living crisis. The financial environment for the public sector as a whole is probably at its most challenging in living memory. And whether I've talked to leaders in Wales or leaders elsewhere in the UK, it is the primary focus for most of their work. So we will take that on. And then we also talk about types of things we might look at in the future in terms of reshaping, and our next steps. So again, this is going to go to corporate performance and resources scrutiny for their considerations, and it will be subject to constant updates, both by Cabinet and also by the strategic leadership team, with further updates coming back. As we move forward with the consultation on the corporate plan, aspects of reshaping are also going to fit in with that. So it will be quite flexible. We'll be talking sometimes around corporate plan, sometimes around reshaping. And if people come to the consultation events to do with the corporate plan, we'll very much be framing that in the whole agenda of reshaping going forward. So as I said, it's going to be discussed more widely, but there is a presentation online, appendix, as an appendix, can't even say today, to this report. So similar to the other one, there are a number of recommendations before us for this. And the first one is it's recommended that Cabinet considers and notes the content of this report and Appendix A, that it is recommended that Cabinet approves the proposals for developing the reshaping programme as set out in this report and Appendix A. It's recommended that Cabinet refers this report and Appendix A to Corporate Performance and Resources Scrutiny Committee for its consideration, alongside the draft corporate plan in October 2024, with any views being referred back to Cabinet for consideration. Next, it's recommended that Cabinet approves this report and Appendix A being emailed to all councillors, members of the Joint Consultative Forum, all town and community councils, the Public Services Board, the Regional Partnership Board, the Council's diversity networks and the Equalities Consultative Forum for their information, inviting any views to be shared with the Chief Executive for consideration. So that will be fed back into the mix on this. It's recommended that Cabinet receives further updates on the reshaping programme as it develops in parallel with the Council's work on the new corporate plan and medium-term financial strategy. So this is very much going to underpin the corporate plan with the way in which we, as a local authority, will be working in future. And I'm happy to move those. Mark, you've got your hand up. Did you want to come in?
Yeah, I just want to come in on a certain point in relation to page 8 before I second the recommendations. I just want to clarify on the key income generation opportunities in terms of car parking. We're not looking at car parking charges within our town centres, and I just want to emphasise that as part of our reshaping programme. And the other point I'd like to make is obviously the high degree of consultation. I think it's vital that residents and other stakeholders really get involved in this, because it's about shaping the council for the next 5 years. So I'm happy to second the recommendations, Chair.
Thank you. Yes, I think that's well clarified, and I also think that when we talk about reshaping projects, it gives us an opportunity to actually lay out what the sort of underpinning principles are to each of the areas of work. Why are we doing it? Why is it necessary? What outcomes would there be? What unintended outcomes would there be? That sort of thing. So this is things that we're looking at that we need to have a full and frank discussion on. So thank you for that. And thank you for seconding. Again, I can't see any hands up, so I will take that as agreed. Super. So I will now juggle numerous papers because I have to look at both the reference and also the agenda item. So if we're looking at agenda item 11, which is the annual delivery plan monitoring report, and we can take it alongside the reference from Learning and Culture Scrutiny Committee on the 19th of September, which is agenda item 4. So this was this is the monitoring report purely for Q1 performance. So it's fairly early days at the moment. But it said if we have a quick look, there were a couple of comments from Learning and Culture Scrutiny Committee, and that is that they were concerned about effective monitoring at primary and secondary level on pupil attendance, as had been identified as an emerging area of concern, and also that the annual delivery plan monitoring report should detail efforts to ensure that schools were a safe working place for teachers and the support provided to them. So I'm happy, along with the recommendations, to move that we note that. In terms of the report per se, there was a presentation appended at Appendix A, which provided a summary of overall progress against the commitments for 2024-25. All 5 scrutinies have now reviewed Q1 performance, and so those outcomes were noted within the report, and obviously will be have been taken into consideration. They're actually, if you're interested, and just double check, they are included, the others, at between paragraphs 2.08 and 2.15. So that's all the input from the scrutiny committees, which is predominantly to note the report. So, as I said, it's fairly early days. There are a couple of recommendations before us on this, and that's that Cabinet considers Q1 performance reports results and progress towards achieving the annual delivery plan 2024-25 commitments as aligned to the Council's corporate plan wellbeing objectives, and secondly that Cabinet considers the views and recommendations of scrutiny committees in relation to Q1 performance and approve identified remedial actions as the basis to address areas of underperformance and to tackle the key challenges identified. And I would move those.
And I'm happy to second, Chair.
Thank you. And then moving on to, let's have a look, to agenda item 12. And that's the final draft of the Vale of Glamorgan Council annual self-assessment report. And as I mentioned earlier, alongside this, I'll take the 4 references at agendas item 5, 6, 7 and 8 from Environment and Regeneration Scrutiny Committee, the Corporate Performance and Resources Scrutiny Committee, Learning Culture Scrutiny Committee and Governance and Audit Committee alongside them. So I go through the report first of all. So this is the final draft of the annual self-assessment, and I think it's fair to say that a lot of the ongoing discussions around this self-assessment have also been fed into the corporate plan that we've been discussing in terms of where we go next year in terms of objectives. To actually produce a self-assessment report is a requirement for Welsh local authorities, which requires the council to keep its performance under review, I think it has to be said, and to publish a report setting out the conclusions, which is what we will do ultimately once we've completed this. The council members have formally considered the draft annual self-assessment report via scrutiny committees, and there were 12 comments have been referred to Cabinet, which I'll go through shortly, although there were no formal recommendations or comments from the Healthy Living and Social Care and Safe Communities and Homes and Safe Communities Scrutiny Committee. They both noted the report. Alongside the engagement insight that we've gleaned throughout the year, we've also evaluated a wide range of performance and other data insight from the council's annual planning and performance calendar of activities. So we've drawn conclusions on how well the council is using its resources to achieve the corporate plan wellbeing objectives. And there's over the sort of summer period, there's been a peer challenge process. And so while we've looked at each individual area, there has been a moderation process at director level to make sure that everything is sort of benchmarked in terms of performance. And through that, a couple of assessments that had been rated as good have actually been moved back to fair, in line with some of the discussions that had been had. And that's all laid out within the report. We've also taken feedback from the council's governance and audit committee and also scrutiny committees in terms of how the council can monitor reports and report progress as well. For the period 2024 to 25, we've judged that the council has made good progress in delivering its annual delivery plan commitments as aligned to the corporate plan, the current corporate plan, which is 2020 to 2025. The draft annual governance statement provides reasonable assurance, and an overall judgment of good was attributed to the council's use of resources. So this report now is that any recommendations following Governance and Audit Committee's consideration of the final draft annual self-assessment will be referred back to Cabinet on the 7th of November for final review. And then this will actually go to full council on the 2nd of December for full discussion and an adoption or approval by full council. So go on to that. So at this stage, this is another document that's on its journey. And I will read these, but they are quite lengthy, the recommendations on this. There are 3 recommendations, but they are quite long. Firstly, that Cabinet considers the consultation summary findings and endorses the updated final draft Vale of Glamorgan annual self-assessment report. Actually, I do need to go back because I have completely omitted, after looking it all up, just to double check that all outcomes from scrutiny were included. Most of these are for future self-assessments, but I will mention them as a matter of record. That was that environment and regeneration scrutiny talked of once the annual self-assessment has been finalised and approved by full council, there should be a clear and concise summary of the document produced. And also for future consultations on the annual self-assessment, the council should reach out to the public and interest groups with more specific questions on communication accessibility around this process. And I think that is what's being built into the future corporate plans, etc. So yes, that is very much on the agenda. In the corporate performance and resources scrutiny, there was discussion about working with voluntary and community organisations, which is actually coming forward. There were some points around details within the specific service areas which were taken on board. And there was discussion, well, that's to do with surface areas, about challenge of recruitment and selection within the care provision. Within learning and culture, there was a suggestion that there should be information in relation to where the council spent its money. And I know that there are infographics developed for other reports, and there was discussion as to whether or not they should be used more regularly to allow residents to understand exactly where all our money was spent, and particularly seeing as this was Learning and Culture Committee, which in effect we're talking about half the council's budget is delegated straight to our schools. There were discussion about safeguarding and additional learning needs and attendance within schools. So within their recommendations, they reflected those that the comments were shared or referred back to Cabinet, and that's fine. And then the Governance and Audit Committee, they had a number of comments that they wished to refer to Cabinet. There were, just trying to look, but 8 for the 2023 report, which is more narrative in relation to council's engagement activity or engagement activity judgment, the more narrative in relation to council's procurement judgment, the actual number of people who'd responded to social media polls, increased narrative in relation to the issues around Oracle Fusion, for the commentary in relation to levelling up and transforming towns to be double-checked for accuracy, for the definitions for each rating to be incorporated into the report itself and not through a hyperlink, and where percentages are used a figure for the actual number to be provided, and finally the importance of a public summary and infographics to aid understanding and communications, which is one that I've just mentioned. And then there were a few then in terms of work for the 2024-25 report, which are going to be taken on board by officers in developing that. So I think we need to move that we've noted those comments from Scrutiny Committee. So I will go back to the recommendations proper. Before I do, Eddie, did you want to come in now, or?
Yeah, I did, if you don't mind, Leader. It was just a case of you've just expanded on all the different scrutinies and how much they've looked at this report. It is a large document, and that was one of the major comments. But each scrutiny has its own particular area which they looked into, and the document of this size is a challenge, and that's hence why they've asked for this, an easy read version as they were using it. But the reality is this goes to so many different stakeholders that becomes difficult. As we've all had reports where it doesn't answer a particular question, so we end up with an additional report. So I think the self-assessment report covers all that. And there are some useful comments made by the scrutinies and the governance and audit, which what needs to be said. The Cabinet members had attended those scrutinies and the governance and audit as well in the background. So we are well aware of those comments and we'll take them on board. But I just wanted it noted for the benefits of those who are looking on this. And by all means, the public wants to see how those scrutinies and the length of time it's been taken to go through this report, then they'll see how much work is getting done. Thank you.
Thanks, Eddie. No, totally agree. And it's one of those conversations that actually we have had in terms of quite often there's a request of an easy to read report, but sometimes, as happened with our youth council, actually, that they once on one occasion they said that they wanted a and sort of an easily accessible report from Welsh Government, and then when Welsh Government sent something back, they said, well, no, this is just too top line, and we actually can't get into the consultation questions that you're asking us to do. So they actually sent it back and got another version of it. And I mean, our youth council are brilliant at doing that sort of thing, but we do have to have those conversations in terms of there is an awful lot of information that we as members need to go through in terms of understanding the services that we provide and how they are delivering those services, and are there any areas that come out, and you can't do that with one line of information, can you? So no, thank you for bringing that up. That's really helpful. So if I go back to the recommendations, it's that Cabinet considers the consultation summary findings and endorses the updated final draft Vale Glamorgan Annual Self-Assessment Report 2023-24 appended at Appendix A. Secondly, that Cabinet refers the final draft of the Vale Glamorgan Annual Self-Assessment Report to Governance and Audit Committee, and that will be on the 21st of October 2024, for their consideration and approval in line with their statutory role under Part 6, Section 114 of the Local Government Elections Wales Act 2021, and that upon consideration, the committee refers any recommendations back to Cabinet for their final consideration. That would be on the 7th of November, prior to Cabinet referring this report with the comments of the Governance and Audit Committee and Cabinet's responses to the Council on the 2nd of December 2024 for consideration and approval. But should Governance and Audit Committee have no further comments, to refer to Cabinet for consideration that the final draft Vale Glamorgan Annual Self-Assessment Report be referred to full Council for 2nd of December 2024 for consideration and approval. So basically, if Governance and Audit don't make any recommendations, this will go straight on to Council without coming back to us. And finally, so that we can move it straight forward to Governance and Audit, that the use of paragraph 1514(2) II of the Council's Constitution, that's the urgent decision procedure, be authorised to allow the final draft Vale Glamorgan Annual Self-Assessment 2023-24 to be referred to the Governance and Audit Committee meeting taking place on the 21st of October 2024 for consideration, with any recommendations considered by Cabinet on the 7th of November 2024 prior to full Council consideration on the 2nd of December 2024. So that is basically the route outlined. So I will move those recommendations.
And I'm happy to second, Leader.
Thanks, Mark. And again, can't see anyone else's hands up. So that's agreed. So moving on to agenda item 13, and this is a very straightforward housekeeping report where we look back at the Cabinet work historically from July to September, and that's includes Appendix 1. And then looking forward in terms of what's coming forward for the Cabinet from October to December of this year. Very, very straightforward. So just two recommendations here for us. And that's that the updates to Cabinet Quarterly Work Programme for July to September 2024 attached to Appendix 1 be agreed. And secondly, that the Cabinet Quarterly Work Programme October to December 2024 attached at Appendix 2 be endorsed. So in effect, that is mainly the work that we will be taking forward up until Christmas this year. And I would move those recommendations.
And happy to second, Chair.
Thank you. No dissent, so that's agreed. So moving to agenda item 14, and this is related to the disposal of the former toilet block site at Llantwit Major Beach. This is a part 1 report. We will consider a part 2 report, a confidential report, further on the agenda. So if I can hand over to Mark for that.
Yeah, thank you very much, Leader. Yes, it's a very small report under part 1, and basically what we had 2 businesses that were interested in taking over the toilets and the toilet site, and we had what we call the Insight Board had a look at them, and we then moved to the recommendation now. And the recommendation is that the Cabinet notes the detailed marketing bidding process for the toilet block review to take decisions received via the Part 2 report later on this agenda. And I so move.
Thanks, Mark. And I'm very happy to second that. And if everyone's in agreement, there's no dissent, so that's agreed. Thank you. Then we go over to agenda item 15, and that is the Vale of Glamorgan Local Development Plan 2011 to 2026. That's the 6th annual monitoring report. So it's over to Ruba, Councillor Sivignano. Thank you.
Thank you, Liz. This is, as you've stated, Liz, this is the 6th annual monitoring report for our current local development plan, which runs from 2011 to 2026. As part of the plan that we adopted, you'll all be familiar with the fact that we had a monitoring framework, of which this is the reporting part. Monitoring is obviously a key aspect of Welsh Government's plan to the plan, monitor and manage approach to the planning system. So it's to ensure that we're successfully delivering our local development plan. The monitoring takes the form of an annual monitoring report, which is what you have before you today. And this has to be prepared, approved and submitted to Welsh Government by the 31st of October each year of the local development plan. So you'll see that there are core and local monitoring indicators, and there's a traffic light rating system, which I think you'll all be familiar with. So at the core are those prescribed by Welsh Government and those elements that are considered essential for assessing the implementation of national policy. And obviously the local relates to our own, the Vale of Glamorgan context, and refers to specific requirements of individual policies and proposals contained within our LDP. So as I've said, this is the 6th annual monitoring report, and it covers specifically the period from 1st of April 2023 to the 31st of March of this year. Overall, the monitoring report shows that good progress has again been made in implementing the plan's policies, and that the local development plan strategy remains pretty sound. Where issues have been identified, these can largely be attributed to the recent economic climate and are outside the control of the LDP. So, for example, housing delivery, retail vacancies and employment are matters which are more fully considered when we've been preparing our emerging local development plan for the following 10 years. So the main elements you'll see are set out in 2.4 and to 2.27. And some of the main features, for example, are housing. As of the 1st of April 2024, a total of 6,516 dwellings were completed within the Vale of Glamorgan, of which 4,381 units were general market dwellings against which were against the 2024 monitoring target of 6,242. There's another element, of course, is the affordable housing element, and a further 170 affordable homes have been provided within the monitoring period, which brings the total number of affordable homes provided since 2011 to 2,138. Now, I won't go into all the elements, but just to give you the headings, there's we've considered we have to show our targets under education, climate change, environment, retail, and transport. So the details of those are in the report. So just finally to say that the monitoring report acknowledges that the council has commenced work on our next local development plan, and I would remind members that where monitoring targets have not been met within the current LDP, these matters will be fully addressed through our preparation for our next local development plan. So if I can move to the recommendations, I'm recommending that Cabinet consider and endorse this 6th local development plan annual monitoring report. And it's subject to any consideration or any recommended changes when it goes to the Environment and Regeneration Scrutiny Committee, and that these then be submitted to Welsh Government by the 31st of October. By the 31st of October this year, and this will then be published on our on the council's website. Secondly, that this local development plan annual monitoring report is referred to the Environment and Regeneration Scrutiny Committee for their consideration. And should the Scrutiny Committee resolve to accept this annual monitoring report, Cabinet would consider the annual monitoring report as agreed and can submit this to the Welsh Government by the 31st of October. And that lastly, that delegated authority be granted to the Head of Sustainable Development in consultation with me, the Cabinet Member for Community Engagement, Equalities and Regulatory Services, to make any typographical or other minor changes as necessary prior to publication. And I would move those recommendations.
Thank you, and happy to second that. It's I can remember the discussions when that was first used. It's just that long, so no, thank you for that. Again, I can't see any dissent from Cabinet members, so we can take that as agreed. Thank you. And then it's back over to you again, Ruba, for the update to affordable housing supplementary planning guidance, consultation, feedback, proposed changes and adoptions. That's agenda item 16. Over to you, Ruba.
Thanks, Liz, again. So Cabinet will recall that a report was presented to Cabinet in May of this year, seeking approval to undertake a public consultation on amendments to the adopted affordable housing SPG guidance. It was a 6-week consultation, and this updated our SPG. The consultation took place between the 5th of June and the 17th of July of this year. And really, I just want to outline the most significant change proposed as part of the consultation, and that's on the transfer values. So the transfer values, just to explain, is the discounted value that a social landlord will pay a developer for units that they are required to build as part of the Section 106 agreements that they have with us. Now, the Welsh Government figures that these transfer values are based on haven't been updated since 2021. But in the meantime, construction costs have increased since the time of these original values, and there's been a need to ensure that these figures remain up to date. so that private developers can continue to deliver affordable housing through Section 106 agreements. But we also have to be mindful that social landlords can afford to pay the cost of those units. So it is a fine balancing act, which we think as a council, we think we've struck the right balance. So the values included in the amended SPG reflect increases to the original figures in line with Welsh Government's rent inflation, and a methodology for keeping these figures up to date is also set out going forward. So a total of 10 representations were received as part of the consultation, and representatives were broadly in support of the principle of increasing transfer values. However, as I've stated, there was some disagreement about how much they should be increased by and the methodology for doing so. The developing industry, the developers obviously felt the figures should be higher than what was consulted on to reflect overall cost increases, whereas obviously social landlords felt the values were acceptable. But we feel that, as I've said, that we've struck a balance. And obviously that balance is important to achieve fair transfer values, and the report just highlights this update to the transfer values. Also included in the report are the delegated powers to allow these figures to be updated annually following the publication of the Welsh Government's social rent cap, which is also an important amendment that we'd asked for. So if I can just move to the recommendations, Liz. So I think I have, there are a few recommendations. Firstly, that Cabinet notes the contents of the report and endorses the responses to the representations received on the updated affordable housing supplementary planning guidance, the SPG, and that's attached at Appendix 1. Secondly, that subject to the provisions of Recommendation 3, Cabinet approves the amended SPG attached to this report as at Appendix 2 for immediate use in development management decisions alongside the adopted local development plan. So we're asking that officers comply this immediately. Thirdly, that the head of sustainable development and/or director of place, in consultation with me as the cabinet member, be authorised to update the transfer values on an annual basis. That fourthly, that the head of sustainable development and/or the director of place be authorised to agree the final format of any necessary minor typographical changes and minor amendments to the SPG prior to its publication, and thereafter update them with any factual updates in response to any policy or legislative changes, as and when that's appropriate. And finally, that members of the planning committee be advised of the outcome of the public consultation and the adoption of the SPG. And I would move those recommendations.
Thank you, Rupert. Yes, happy to second those, and it's good if it's necessary to ensure the continued supply of funding for affordable housing. So that's really good. Again, I can't see any comments from other cabinet members, so that's agreed. Thank you.
Thanks.
So today we do have one urgent item, and that's related to the social care record system. So that's under agenda item 17.1, and this is over to the Cabinet Member for Social Care and Health. It should be noted that there will be an associated Part 2 item, or urgent Part 2 item, that we will discuss later. So over to you, Eddie.
Thank you, Leader. As you say, this report, although it's coming under quite quickly, it's due to the nature of the tender process and whatever. So it's the report's to provide an update following the report that was in April 24 regarding the social care record system. and currently we're contracted to the Care Director, which is more commonly known as WCIS, Welsh Community Care Information System. The report outlines the current situation with regard to progress made towards replacing the system and the need to now complete the procurement process. The detail of the procurement process can be found in the accompanying Part 2 report. So just quickly run through background. You're aware that as of January 26, the existing Care Director, or the WCIS system, has come to end of life. So therefore, it's essential that we replace the system and migrate all the data and everything to a new software system. And throughout 23 and 24, we engaged with National Connecting Care Programme, which is designed to procure a single solution on behalf of the 18 local authorities and 6 regional health boards. However, because of some delays, in March 2024, a decision made to procure on a regional cluster basis. And then the report talks about the clusters who form that, several local authorities. If you look at the report 1.3, it lists those clusters that are there. And within that, they were given delegated authority to Director of Social Services and procurement lead to the Vale of Glamorgan. And this was to negotiate and agree the final terms of the agreement with other councils and then to arrange an execution of that agreement. The procurement process was initiated in partnership with our regional colleagues 28th of June 24, and it's under the procurement approach has been the one that's this RM 6529 Health and Social Care Framework. So we know that it's a well-known framework that's used. It's recognised by many of the providers. In fact, 3 of the companies that tendered are on that framework already. The detailed procurement exercise is in Part 2 of the report. So the key issues that were part of this is the support of WLGA and ADSSC, that's the Association of Directors of Social Care. An SRO, Senior Responsible Officer Advisory Group was formed. And this was established so that it includes representation from local authorities intended to deliver the new system. This SRO is primarily the directors of social services and heads of digital. So there's often a question on the expertise, and we've included the digital heads. So that's a useful point to make. And this SRO group is co-chaired by the Director of Social Services in the Vale of Glamorgan. There are subgroups, and the 2 subgroups in particular is about data migration and also the exit from the Care Director. Clearly, there's some challenges there as well. I think if that covers most of the comments I wanted to make, yeah, okay. So if I move to the recommendations, to consider the outcome of the procurement process as Part 2 report, and 2, to refer this report to Healthy Living Social Care Scrutiny Committee for their consideration. I so move.
Thank you, Eddie. And I think that I'm really pleased that this has come forward, probably more speedily than we expected. But it's when you actually think of the fact that this record system is dealing with our most vulnerable, we can't take any risks in terms of having the right information accessible at all times. So absolutely delighted to second the recommendations on this.
Thank you, Leader.
And there's no dissent, so that is agreed. And we'll discuss the rest going forward. So we do have items for discussion on today's agenda and Part 2. Firstly, the one that was linked to item 14, that's the Llantrwit Major former toilet block, and also one linked to the urgent Part 1 item that we've just discussed. These are matters that are considered to be confidential, and therefore the meeting will need to move into private session where such matters can be discussed under what's called Part 2. Therefore, I'll ask for Cabinet to agree to move to Part 2 and ask the Cabinet Officer to stop the recording of this open session. to ensure that no members of the public are present after this point and only allow relevant parties to remain to hear the detail of the items to be discussed. Following the meeting, the outcome of the Part 2 discussions will be formally captured as part of the minutes of the meeting and will advise all parties the final decisions of the Cabinet for the relevant items. Therefore, can I formally move Part 2? And I will need somebody to second that. And
I'm happy to second Part 2.
Thank you, Mark. Ask the Cabinet Officer to ensure that only relevant parties remain from this point on, and for the live stream and recording to be stopped, please. So